To welcome director Chris Appelhans and editor Nathan Schauf to discuss K-pop Demon Hunters, excuse me. Director Maggie Kang will be joining us in a short bit. But Chris and Nathan, thank you so much for being here today. I'm just so excited to talk about this film with you, and I'm really happy that you're here.
Thank
Oh,
you
our
for having
pleasure.
us.
Maggie just texted me. She said, I'm coming with 7 Gs. So she's on her way.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. A huge thank you to our sponsor for this evening's event, Netflix. It's a pleasure to be working with you again. Thank you as always for your support, as well as our premier partner, the American Cinema Editors, and our year-round sponsor, the Baton Rouge Film Commission. Where to begin? We have a lot of audience questions, and I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. And thank you to everybody in the audience for your excellent questions. I want to start. Oh, look at that. There's Maggie. Hello,
Sorry.
Maggie. How are
Perfect.
Hello.
you?
Hey,
Good.
Welcome,
Hi.
welcome. I'm going to change your name because it says Chris. There we go. Now you're Maggie.
Oh,
Hello,
That was
Maggie.
weird.
We
Why did
just,
that happen?
I don't
it's all a
know.
blur at this point.
Yeah, it's true.
We just let our audience in. We just greeted everybody, so our audience is here with us. And you came in perfect time because I was about to ask the first question from our audience. From Devin, and Maggie, I just told our other two guys, if there's a question directed at one of you, please feel free to jump in if you feel like it, and be as technical as possible.
Okay.
From Devin, first, every story starts somewhere, whether it's from a general concept, a character idea, or even a quick sketch on a napkin. What was the first piece of K-pop Demon Hunters story that came to any of you? I know that you were not the writers of this film, but as obviously the creators, would love to hear.
Oh, we are. We are also
Oh,
the
We
you
wrote
are.
it
writers.
too.
Yes. Yes, we wrote it as well.
Oh my gosh, my apologies.
Yes.
That was my mistake. Okay, thank you,
That's
Maggie.
okay.
Go ahead.
But then also as directors, you're just always writing. And
Yeah.
especially with animation, you don't really stick to script. We have story artists and we work in the edit room with Nathan, and that's where we come up with a ton of our ideas. Um, I guess the first spark was just I wanted to uh, create a film that celebrated Korean culture, and that's kind of where it started. And um, I had like a bunch of different ideas in my head about different tones and types of characters, types of specifically type of female characters I wanted to see, and kind of put it all together and got like a Korean demon hunter concept, and then K-pop was another Korean element that I could jam in there. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Chris, and anything to add to that before we continue on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other maybe like founding idea that Maggie had that I loved was this way she wanted to represent the female characters. Just like a different type that was more real and more fully formed. And I think I was really excited about making a film that dramatized the power of music, which sounds cheesy, but it's true. So why not? And we really bonded around those kind of goals, and they mashed together really nicely and made for so many of the weird, but I think fun ideas that we tried to execute on.
I love weird but fun. And again,
Yeah,
my apologies. I had completely forgotten that you two were among the four screenwriters of this film. And Maggie, I know you had story credit too. So my sincerest apologies for
Oh,
that
do I have
error.
story credit?
Yeah, you do have story
story
credit
Sweet.
on the
by
film.
yeah,
story
story
by
Oh,
by
story
Maggie
by. Oh,
Kang.
okay. I thought you meant
Yes.
story boarding.
No, no, no.
I was like,
No, story
yes,
by
story by.
Maggie.
Yes, yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
Shay
Chris
from
and
our
Maggie were obviously on it way before I was, but just a fun fact, the
yeah.
first sequence I ever started to cut was what turned into the soda pop sequence. So the first thing I did, I was thrown into the crazy world with the Sausage Boys and the Huntrix all in one place, and I just could kind of imagine how much work had already gone into the process before I was even on board. So it was pretty fun that was the first thing I ever worked on. So.
Why was that the first sequence that you started on?
Well, we don't start boarding in order. It's all based
Yeah.
upon what the directors feel like is the farthest along in story and writing and musically that we should get started on first. And so when I came on, that was just the next one ready to go. And they were like, "Hey, go do that."
Nathan also has a real facility for music, and he understands both the visual and the like sort of rhythm of a sequence really well. And it was the first thing he cut, and we it was finally the way we wanted the sequence to feel editorially. And we were like, oh, this is our guy. He's very talented. And we need the movie to have this conversation with music and story the whole time, pretty much. And so his instincts for that were pretty important to even proving to anybody that it could work.
With that
Yeah.
specific sequence going off, oh, Maggie, I'm so sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, just
I was going to
agree.
say, with that specific sequence, what did you feel that Nathan brought out in your work that had already been done, that was boarded, that was scripted, that you maybe didn't see initially in it?
I mean, I think having an editor who is so musically gifted and is so familiar with that process is like so helpful because especially with especially with our film because we have so much music, but there's just this rhythmic cadence to a scene that an editor brings with every cut and it was just, when we saw that cut that he done, we were like, who did this? Because there's so much like great balance of like music moments, but also like the comedy integrated into
Comedy.
it. And then we also really loved this dramatic scene that he cut as well. So it just felt like he was our dude, you know.
Maggie, which dramatic scene was that?
Oh, it was like a very early version of Rumi going to Celine and in that third act moment, the very dramatic, the most dramatic scene in our movie.
Nathan, did you?
Sequence 2600.
Yeah.
2600, yes.
I
Did
still
you
know
pick
them
the
all. I
temp
The
for
still know them
that?
sequence
all.
from,
Yeah.
yes, sorry, go
I
ahead.
can't remember because Nathan also picked great temp music, which is
Yeah.
another like t taste indicator, where you're
Hmm.
like, oh, this person gets what we're trying to do here. And so it was like a very soulful and dramatic, but there was some synths, there were some modern touches, and so immediately you were like, oh, this sequence is working within this broader
Yeah,
pop music conceit. So that was another. You're almost like speed dating a little bit with your crew, trying to figure out if they share your sensibility in that first few months of working together. But we did. God, it's just so painful to compliment Nathan so much.
I know. I
I
don't
know.
like that.
We should really
Sorry.
ask another question.
Yeah, let's
As
no
an
more of
editor, let's pick up the pace a little bit. Let's get going.
that.
Chris, I love that you use the word soulful because I think that's one of the things that makes this film so special. The fact that it really is soulful. It has this manic energy to it, but you do have these beautiful moments where it does get quieter and where it does become more soulful. Can you
Yeah.
all talk about weaving in those quieter, more soulful, as you say, moments into a film that is otherwise manic, high energy, and like
Mm,
really doesn't stop. I mean, it's a beautifully edited and crafted piece of work.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks to Nathan.
Oh no.
Damn it.
Well,
Yeah,
Listening
Right
what
back where we
conversations
started.
went into that,
I
into
feel,
weaving in
I
those
feel
quieter
like
moments?
yeah, Josh, I feel like on the writing front, like Maggie and I were trying to answer this question of what demon fighting and music had to do with the story and the idea that Maggie had of Rumi being half demon, and instantly brought up a kind of pathos and like a secret and a sense of shame that the characters had to struggle with, and that broadened out to be this idea of inner demons and like the voice in your head and this sort of toxic thing that we all have a version of that we struggle with. And so then the story and the writing of it became about trying to reconcile something very propulsive and very anthemic and really fun and funny with that pretty deep universal struggle. And so you needed the scenes to kind of advance both sides of the story at all times. And that I think we backed into a nice rhythm there of having the story was requiring sometimes for the plot to move forward and other times for Rumi and Ginu to go and have a conversation in private that was vulnerable or the girls to do the same. And so you had a nice checkerboard that emerged of how to go fast and go slow.
I
Yeah.
love. Oh, sorry, Mackie, go ahead.
Oh no. I'm sorry. I'm just agreeing. I won't.
Oh, okay. I love that you use the word propulsive because this movie is propulsive. I mean, without its credits, I believe it runs about 80, 89, 90 minutes, and there's not an ounce of fat on this thing. I mean, it's such an efficient piece of storytelling. From Alice in our audience, could you discuss which scenes were eliminated from the film? Was there anything that lacked the propulsion of the rest of this film that you felt early on or even later on needed to be excised, however painfully?
Um, I think a clear one is we got a lot of feedback from the studio and about just learning the backstories of the girls and needing that for just to really follow them and be with them and follow their journey. And so we did a lot of that work in the very beginning of the film, like a scene where the girls really, the first time they meet and they train with Celine on this island to become hunters, and the movie really just rejected it. It just kept saying no, and and we tried many different versions, many different fun versions, and it just never felt like our movie. So that was definitely something that we had to cut, and eventually we just integrated that very tiny bit of storytelling of the background of the girls into the Golden Song, which was the last song that we wrote for the film because it took us a long time to figure out where to put that narrative into the movie, like the backstories of the girls. And and so that was just it was just a really challenging process. But I'm sure you guys could you get it all the way. You put the entire movie up and you start to watch it and rewatch it, and it just starts to tell you what it wants to be. And when you try to jam things in there, it just rejects it. It's just like, nope, it doesn't,
Yeah,
it's not me.
totally.
Nathan, were there any sequences that you saw that you immediately were like this, the film, as Maggie is saying, rejected it? Um,
Well, besides the beginning, what Maggie was talking about, like there was a couple, throughout the movie that didn't quite really weren't really necessary. And a lot of times we would just, Chris and Maggie and I would just be like, well, hey, we're saying this kind of here and here. Do we need to say it both
Hmm.
times? Or,
Yeah.
hey, we have this whole other sequence for this one thing. Can we just fit that in somewhere else? So it wasn't always about cutting sequences out of the movie. It was making sequences as possible because we just didn't have the time. As you mentioned, it's not a very long movie at all with everything we're packing in. It was really just becoming as efficient as possible and really understanding if we've already told the audience this, are we repeating ourselves? Is this new information? Would they even need this information? Like we were really good about cutting it down to its core and then seeing what we were missing and just figuring out exactly where everything needed to go so precisely that no one was ever left in the dark or asking any questions during the movie. And we made sure to say things when the audience needed to know and left them asking questions so they would stay involved and
Yeah.
keeping little things like
Yeah.
that. So I mean, it was just a lot of fine tuning all throughout and just constantly asking ourselves questions, like, do we
I
need
mean,
this? Do we
we
need
would
more?
do exercises where Nathan would take a chunk or scene and he's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to really, really cut it. And then he would show it to us and we're like, we kind of like this, but wait, what did you cut out? And he's like, well, if you don't miss it, then it doesn't matter.
Not gonna tell you.
Not going to tell you. And then we start to really figure out what he cut, but it just reveals to us like what is absolutely necessary for storytelling, and it's really hard. Like editing yourself is a very very hard process,
Yeah.
as a creative person. So it's just really great to have a partner who is just can be brutal with that and tell you what you really don't need.
I love that
My
exercise.
favorite,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
no, just to the writing of it too, my favorite book on screenwriting is a playwriting book. And the thing that the guy does so well is he really shows you how to map out a character's growth so that um, every change of that character from whatever arc you're trying to get them on is earned. Like he kind of makes you map it out and put words to each stage. And then if you're doing that, you are forced to figure out like, well, shit, I'm just repeating myself. This sequence is not moving this character any farther in their growth. And so you end up having to ask yourself what the heck the point of this next chunk of the story might be for this character. And if you
Mhm.
can, man, it's always torturous and you never really know, like, you don't know that, you never know the solution from the start. You have to cut it and rewrite it. But I feel like that's always been a go-to for us of really asking ourselves what this part of the movie means to a character so that even a sequence that might be
Yeah.
superficially silly or funny, like we always talk about the scene where they're signing fans, doing a fan sign competition. And that is primarily like bias shipping, which in K-pop means like who's in love with who of the competing groups. But it's also a place where we tucked in a conversation between Rumi and Gino about how she felt about her demon side. And Gino has a line about, he says something like, trust me, if hate could beat Kima, I would have done it a long time ago, which is a real revelation in terms of this is a guy who hates actually who he is and hates who he works for. And he hasn't never led on to that before. So you're like having fun and you're being silly, and then boom, suddenly you're keeping that audience aware of these people having an effect on each other. And I love when we can do both of those things.
And I think what you're highlighting right there, Chris, is part of this film's secret sauce, so to speak. The fact that you can tuck those little moments in there, and it has this surprising emotional impact to it. Just a short bit ago, we were talking about the narrative efficiency of this film and the use of exposition. I thought one of your cleverest pieces of exposition was, we have the voiceover at the very beginning of the film, and then you have the fans talking about the different characters and as they're being interviewed by an unknown camera crew. I
Mhm.
thought that was one of the cleverest pieces of exposition I've seen in some time. How did that all come about? I would love to hear that.
Oh, we've never talked about this
Seven,
before.
yeah, 73 versions of the first 10 minutes. That was version 71.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was. Thank you. The fans are character in the movie, and they also really are helpful in showing the kind of dual life of the girls, which is an element that we had a lot of fun with, where public facing they are these K-pop stars, but then secretly they are the inheritors of this legacy, this tradition that's been from centuries ago, protecting the world against these demons. And so it was really important. It was a way to show the audience what the public knows in the film about these girls, their public facing persona, and then and and a little bit of their backstory as well, like where Rumi comes from and who her mom is and who Celine is, and then right after that we meet the girls and they're completely not what we expect tonally. They're silly and shoving food into their faces. And then right at the end of that, we get the first look of them as demon hunters who, that is that secret life that they're hiding from the fans. So it was just our way of like putting those right next to each other so that we get that A and B of this dual life.
The other moment on this subject of exposition that I really loved, speaking of their dual life, is we see them in the plane. They're about to slurp down their snack, and we learn so much from them as they're bonding over their love of snacking, and being together in that plane before they obviously fight the demons, then fly into their concert. Can you talk about, I'm trying to think the right way to word this. Can you talk about exposition through action, and exploring exposition through
Ooh.
action? And Nathan, I would love to hear your contributions to this, what sounded like it was a pretty tough opening to crack as well.
For sure. Well, it really goes back to what Maggie was saying earlier. Like we had tried so many versions and the movie rejected it. And no matter how much we tried introducing the characters in however many ways, it never felt like just this, like the only way to find out about how you feel about these fans is experiencing it yourself. So as fans in the movie going to see their final show of this massive world tour, it just immediately amped up the excitement. And you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to meet these people. And so we're like, all right, we can set it up that way. They're at the show. Then we meet them. It's a complete 180 of what you think. And then you're like, oh, then they go right into a song, killing demons and being awesome. And then they land you back at that concert we strayed from. So it was a very, very efficient way to wrap everything that you needed to know of all the characters. And it was the first time we kind of had that roughly cut together, we're kind of like, oh, wait, now if we do this, we can do this, and that solves this, and that solves this, without actually feeling like you're getting exposition because you feel like you're there with them, living with them, because the characters just kind of let you in with how uniquely individual they are. And I think those three personalities really resonate with pretty much everyone on the planet. Like everyone resonates with one of the characters really well in a way, and they're just so diverse characters that Chris and Maggie wrote that I think it was really easy for the audience to connect with one of them, if not all three of them, which was a really, really cool thing that and it was one of the hardest parts of the movie, and it
Cool.
really came together, kind of towards the end of it. So, it was
That's a
pretty
good word,
crazy.
Nathan, anticipation, because
Yeah.
that I'm sorry, I'm just quoting playwrights, but somebody said like anticipation mixed with uncertainty is like the dramatic, sweet place to be. And I think
Well, you are in front
that's
of a bunch of books, so that makes sense.
these are my wife's books. I haven't read most of these. She's much smarter than
You
me.
told her.
I I think what's neat, and it took us a long ass time to figure these first 7, 8 minutes out, but you start with a cold open, which is 15 seconds, basically with rabid pop star audience saying, and then that is like, oh, cool, these are famous pop stars, and then it ends with a line that says, um, "They will know you as pop stars, but you'll be so much more than that." Wait, what? We go back into history. We get this mythology of these crazy, amazing, ancient Korean superheroes. And then you come back to the present with no explanation of how any of this is going to reconcile. And you're like, what the fuck do these have to do with each other? But then you get the fan stuff, which is giving you a little bit of what you want. You want to know more about these girls, but you still don't have the answer to what it means to be demon hunters. And then to what Maggie's saying, you get up into the plane, you meet them, you like them, and then you finally get across that fight in the plane and the concert that they jump into. You finally close the loop on all those questions and all that anticipation. So
But but
yeah,
most importantly, we do that through the song, which is
yes,
a
that's
pop
right.
song. And so it was a difficult, I mean, all their songs were very difficult, but this one was difficult
Oh,
because it is the first time we're meeting Huntrix. And so this is going to define kind of their sound as a group. And we really wanted these girls to be like very strong, badass, they're warriors. And so the lyrics play on that. There's so if we listen to the lyrics, there's mention of the, carriers of this legacy and
mhm.
the fact that they're these warriors, but they're not like so heavy-handed that they're not literal. So to an audience who is not in the know, you're not thinking like, oh, these girls are battling demons secretly behind our backs. They're just
Yeah.
this strong, badass group of women. And so that was all, and every single one of her songs plays on two levels. They're carrying narrative, but also like there's subtext to it. So there's two meanings to each of the songs.
Yeah, each of the songs are so purposely and thoughtfully placed throughout the film. And it's just highly intelligent filmmaking. I love that you use the word heavy-handed because I think in lesser hands, the Huntrix would be super heavy-handed. They would be icons. They would not be the human beings, the noodle slurping, goofballs hanging around on a couch in their free time that you all have created them to be. We've spoken a lot about writing so far, and Nathan from our audience and Max had a very similar question. Nathan says. Your co-writers Danya Jimenez and Hannah McMeechan thanked you at the Annie Awards this past weekend for hiring them to choose the film to write the film with you over choosing seasoned veteran writers. Can you describe what stood out to you about them and their writing and about their biggest strengths or contributions to the story as you were crafting the film? And Nathan, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well.
Well, yeah, we went through a lot of writers. Like we read a lot of spec scripts and it's actually really funny, but the girls will love it. But there was a script that I read of theirs, and structurally it just kind of was not a good structure. It was just kind of didn't make sense. But the character is this female protagonist, and she's kind of unlikable, and but you kind of are rooting for her the entire way. And because she's just charming, and there's this like quality to her that where you're like, I really don't like you, but why can't I look away? And then at the end of the script, she's kind of redeemed, and you really like feel for her. And I don't know, there was a tone to that script that really felt unique, and I hadn't seen a character portrayed that way, like a female character especially. And because that was the kind of like vibe I wanted for these girls, it just felt like a good fit. And I also just think it's so rare that you find female writers that are that young and have like that fresh voice. And they were able to give our 20-something-year-old characters this 20-something-year-old voice and really, I don't know, like keep tabs on old millennials on like how the cool kids talk, how the young people talk.
I love though, Maggie, that you were able to recognize that in their writing in that screenplay.
Yes, yes.
That's such a beautiful thing that you were able to tease that out, and that
Yeah.
you appreciated the fact that their character was so deeply unlikable, but there was something that you connected to about it.
Yes, yes. And another thing I'd like to mention is Hannah and Daniel are just they just crank out ideas
Yeah.
and we would sit together and we would run into this problem story thing and oh gosh, this is a really difficult thing we asked them to come up with some ideas spend a day to think about it and they would come back and it would always be like 5 or 6 ideas and they would all be great and they would work and they would progressively get more and more ridiculous but really funny and but addressing the problem and that was just I don't know there's such a skill to that and I don't know they really inspired me to like to develop that skill within myself and so like that was I don't know
Like
there
a
was just it was
productive
yeah
iteration instead of
yes
just retreading. Yeah.
yes
Hard
but
to
always
do.
thinking about the entertainment value within that
Right.
problem solving so that's it's a really hard thing to do but they were able to do it.
Nathan, do you
And they
remember?
also wrote,
Oh, yeah, go
they
ahead.
did
Sorry,
write a
Chris.
couple, yeah, like
Oh
I
yeah.
think they were, in some ways, they didn't have all the life experience to write about like trauma and deep generational shame, but they wrote some really nice lines that, because we would talk to them about Rumi and Gino. I remember they wrote the line, Gino says, I think Rumi says, "You're a demon. Demons don't feel anything." And Gino's
Mm.
totally taken aback and says, "Are you kidding? All we do is feel." Um, and sometimes when writers turn in pages and you're writing too, all you're looking for is like just one line in the scene
Yeah.
that can help a fork in the road to break into the next part of the story you need to unfold. And so little moments like that where they would just give you a line that could you could branch out and start writing along that path. It's really hard to find those lines. That's the poetry of it all. So
One of my favorite lines in the movie
yeah.
for Gina.
And I love the fact that again you were able to through this, as you were talking about earlier, when working with finding Nathan and the rest of this team, that through this speed dating-esque process, you were able to find two writers whose voices you connected with this much and who obviously complemented you so wonderfully. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get to a question from Helen in our audience. Nathan, this is probably more directed at you. And Fran had a very similar question. Helen says, what's one storytelling decision that came from the edit rather than the script or animation team? And were there any scenes that transformed dramatically in the editing phase compared to the storyboard or animatic? And Chris and Maggie, please feel free to add in as well.
Mm.
I mean, that's the best thing about editing animation is that, I start with the blank canvas and they send me all the storyboards, we record all the dialogue. Myself and my team find the sound effects and we find different options for music. And just like in the writing, like they wouldn't just send me like, hey, here's the dialogue we want, here are the storyboards we want. It was like, hey, we're recording a bunch of alts, we're drawing extra panels, and we're just gonna see what works best. So, Chris and Maggie were so trusting of me just to be like, hey, here you go. We're gonna try all these things. Let's see what works. And I would craft together what I think the best thing was, and then they'd be like, okay, and then I'm like, well, wait, I have two other alts, and then it would kind of be like, well, we like the first part of this part of this one, and this part of this one, and then I would do that, and then I was like, ah, well, now one thing doesn't really lead to another, and I always talk about dominoes when I'm editing. I'm like, we need all the dominoes to fall in the correct order, so we get from the very first frame of the picture to the very last frame of the picture, and so working with Chris and Maggie, we would just craft all day and edit, and then it was
Yeah.
just so much fun. And there was a lot of times, like they said earlier, like what Maggie was saying, they're like, this just doesn't feel right. We're going to go away. We're going to come back and show us what you can come up with, And then, as Maggie said earlier, I was like, if you can tell me what you miss, I'll put it back in. But sometimes they're just like, I don't remember what you cut. But then there's many times, just like Maggie's favorite line from Genu, I might have cut that at some point. Not saying I cut that line because that line's amazing, but there are many times where they'd be like, I really want that. You cut out this one thing that was really, really important. And sometimes I don't know
Yeah.
why it's so important
Yeah.
because we haven't got to the next part of the movie for me to edit, or I wasn't in an exact meeting while I knew the significance of it. So it's really just, but other times I would do things where they'd be like, oh, we didn't think of it that way. Well, now if we do it
Mhm.
that way, maybe it'll solve this problem over here we're trouble with. And it's a really special feeling being in the edit bay with the directors because you really
Yeah.
just get to be creative and freedom. And it's not just black and white, just things come out of nowhere. We try different things and we all really work together just to really, make sure we're all heading towards the same goal, which is always nice.
Yeah, the
It's
short
really,
answer is
yeah,
every sequence.
yeah.
Like you
But
don't know until you get it in there. Yeah.
sorry, it's really my. I mean, I think it's Chris's too, but it's like my favorite part of the process because the movie is getting made live, and we spend hours together, and that's why we can bicker like this like siblings because we do become that way. We're kind of we don't yell at each other, but it's hard. It's hard work. It gets really difficult, and we spend a lot of hours in there and like a lot of late hours, and we labor over scenes and moments, and we're all like Nathan saying, like we're all wanting the same thing. We want the jokes to land, we want the moments to land, and sometimes it's rewriting in the room. We're constantly writing with Nathan and live, and there are times when we change lines, and so one of us it's usually me, has to run to the next room and record a line of dialogue for scratch that gets processed, and then within like minutes just is given to Nathan, and we can cut it in, and we can really work the real it all together, just like live together, and then Nathan will go back and take his time and re-edit and refine things. But that's like it's the most magical process because there's so many things that you think works in script, works in storyboard, and then once it goes into the cut, it just kind of loses steam. And
Yeah.
especially like montage sequences, like the biggest one in our movie is when the girls are writing takedown, and through that process we see Rumi kind of question her beliefs, her worldview. Is you kind of create beats that you think will work in storyboard and when you pitch it, but when you go into editorial, there's like a rhythmic thing that's missing, and so that's where I think something like this, that is something that Nathan will take and really kind of craft it with his knowledge of music and story and pacing, and then really present us with something that we didn't think really even to start. We it just it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
So
structures are really hard to imagine on the
yeah.
page. And once you see them editorial, you're like, oh, of course it's like this. But even
Mhm.
transcribing the edit back to page, you're like, this is weird. This is hard
Yeah.
to picture.
Yeah. And
But
then he's
even
like, I
with,
got it.
yeah, I think because it's so long, like Maggie and I were rewriting this movie for 6 years, basically. So the rewriting never ends, but Nathan becomes your partner because he's living the edit with you, and so much of like that efficiency you're talking about, Josh, is like you're trying to crack combinations on a safe. Sometimes it feels like, and you're just like, what's the fucking this? And
Yeah.
I remember Nathan wrote a line in the room. He said, when Celine is talking to Rumi in the past, he said, nothing will change until your
Until your
patterns are
patterns are gone.
gone. Yeah, which was, we had written some long ass versions of that line, and they felt like we kept cutting them because they were so cumbersome. But Nathan had been living with us, staring at the same safe deposit box, trying to crack the combination. And he said, just say this. And we're like, that's it. That's everything. So that level of collaboration, it's very hard to explain to people, but that's the only way I think you get it to this level of collective tightness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that specific example, that's why it's so nice with Chris and Maggie because just like Chris says, like we were saying this thing forever, and it's like, well, let's just break it down to the core elements. That's
Yeah.
all we really needed to say in that moment, and it works great. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that that was something that came from you, Nathan. Like what a beautiful distillation of, yeah, exactly. Round of applause for
We
Nathan.
hate it. We want credit for it, but he
I
found
know,
it.
like when he said it, we're like,
So
oh, dang
annoying.
it. Why
yeah,
Yeah,
did
that's
he
what we were
have,
trying to
yeah.
say.
I'd always turn around and they'd be like, "Damn it."
yeah, you
Yeah,
turn around, we're like,
He had a lot of misfires too. He'd be like, maybe the scene is just, and we're like, no, Nathan, that's not what it is.
Yeah, it's like you only get one good idea today.
Gold star. Gold star.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll take it.
I had a lot of non-gold stars as well.
Well, Nathan, I have to say, I'm sure that when your directors tell you, give you a good damn it, that probably is your gold star for the day.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think the thing that really worked with the three of us is that when we all think something is funny, we will fight for it because it's
Yeah.
really, really funny, and we all kind
That's
of have
true.
the same. We have very similar senses of humor, which
Yeah.
is really hard to find,
Yeah.
but within our three different sense of humors, we all have very niche sense of humors as well,
Hmm.
and so I think that really helped the variety of the jokes and the comedy and
Are you talking about your
storytelling.
dad jokes? Yeah.
Yeah. I almost said one in my speech, but I cut it at the Andes. And I was like,
Oh
people are going to boo
no!
me off the stage if I
That was
start
good
with a dad
editing.
joke.
It's
That was
me
good
and Chris.
editing.
Yeah,
Boo!
exactly. I was like, I'm going to edit myself for once. So,
Did any of those dad jokes make it into the movie?
Oh, absolutely
um,
not.
yeah,
I didn't
No,
no.
think
no.
so, but
I would have
had
been
to
fired
ask
on the
just in
spot,
case.
Josh.
You
Yeah.
never know. Maybe you just slipped one in there and,
They brought us closer
I
as
can't believe
friends.
that.
That was their real
Yeah.
value. Yes.
Yes, true.
Sometimes, when you're having a bad day, I'll just throw out a dad joke and they'll be like, well, we're not doing anything worse than that. So we're in a good
Yeah,
place.
right. Yes.
Exactly. I want to get to a question from Marlon, a wonderful question. Marlon says, just shifting gears a little bit, in high energy sequences, what was the hardest choice? Holding on a reaction for emotion or cutting faster to maintain adrenaline? Can you recall a moment where you chose restraint over spectacle?
Ooh,
Oh
Question.
my.
That
wow.
was a good one.
Question.
Um, well, that's the hardest part about editing. Short answer. I mean, because if you're at a frenetic pace, but it has to be emotional, those things don't really talk to each other very well.
Hmm.
And so I can't really think of a specific one off the top of my head, but that was actually one of the biggest challenges of the entire movie. I mean, it was just knowing when to hold and stay on the emotion. I mean, the scene that always kind of still tears me up is right after, Rumi's revealed at the concert and she goes backstage. I mean, those were the shots that were just like, oh my God, when we're holding on a shot, you just feel the emotion of those three amazing women and you're just like,
Mm.
I mean, the whole world's crashing down on screen. And so you don't really want to be frenetic in that moment because you won't be able to, you know, be with that emotion. So if someone knows how to do that, please tell me.
Josh, have you seen Sentimental Value?
I
Oh, so good.
Oh,
That is
so
one of my
good.
favorite films in recent memory. We actually featured a Q&A with its director and editor a few
Oh
months
my
ago.
God,
Oh,
amazing. I think what that made me realize, which I think we did instinctually on our movie, was
mm,
when there's subtext, when there's something to think about besides what's been said, it can be nice to hang out.
hmm.
When there's not, it's okay to go fast. If a person is saying something and you're meant to understand everything else that it might have meant, and you're hanging around to understand that, that's nice. And I was just blown away by his construction of that film, where the first third, I'm like, what are these shots? Why are we doing these fucking shots of hallways and doors and then that exact same structure got filled with meaning in the last third. And I was like, I could stare at this stool shot through a doorway for 10 minutes because I'm thinking about everything you've loaded it up with. So this is so amazing. What a movie. Ugh.
I love that you mentioned that one because that was a movie that I saw the first time a while ago. I saw it again, and yeah, I mean the subtext in every single scene in that film. I mean, it's brilliantly the dialogue in and of itself is brilliant. Then you have everything that's underneath it. It's just a magnificent piece of work.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that you mentioned that one. Speaking of the film's musical numbers, I mean, you all have just such a seemingly classical understanding of what makes a musical number work, and it's so wonderful to see this kind of like old style mixed with this hyper modern new style for all of your musical sequences. Did you study any great classic musicals or any newer musicals when prepping this film or when even in production?
That would have been a good idea, Josh, but we
Yeah,
did
he
the
would have.
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Well,
were
that's an
like,
even
this
more
isn't a
impressive
We just,
answer.
musical. This is not
yeah,
a
we were,
musical.
Um,
Well,
yes.
All right, fair enough. That's even more impressive that you didn't study anything. So I'm very impressed. I'm going to get to a question on this subject from Julian in our audience. He was wondering which was the most difficult of the musical numbers for you all to edit. Was there any, or were there any pieces of any musical numbers, any emotional beats where you were like, "This is so hard to crack," and then finally somebody had an idea and boom, you got it?
Hmm.
I'll say
Probably.
what. Oh, you go ahead,
What
Maggie.
do you think? No,
I was gonna
you
say the least hardest one was how it's done at the beginning because
oh,
we always knew. For me, we all that was also one of the first sequences I cut, and
mm, that's
at
true.
least for
Yeah.
me, of like where it started and where it needed to go,
Hmm.
you know,
Right.
The
and
structure.
we always knew what the that they were going to be demon hunters, and we always knew what we needed to say and stuff like that. We didn't
Hmm.
know how we were going to say it or what we were going to say, but
Hmm.
we knew
Hmm.
all the things it needed to be, and I
Yep.
think. Um, that was the opposite of the answer you're looking for, but that's the best I could come up with.
It's probably the climax, right? I would say the
Yeah.
climax was the toughest, and I don't know. It was. I feel like Takedown was hard too because that was.
So
I mean
layered.
that was in the like once again the sequence where the girls are writing the song and Remy's having second thoughts about herself, and that was I don't know, that was kind of in the middle of production where things were just so hard, and the production like wheels were turned like we had to like put things into production, and it felt like everything was moving so quickly, and we were like, okay, well, time to ship this scene where they're writing a song as we're like that we're playing a song as they're writing it. And it was like, okay, is this gonna work? I don't know. That was kind of like a Hail Mary thing, but it worked out great.
That's a
Just
good,
so
that's a
gross.
good, yeah, that's a good reason to talk about our music
Orin.
editor, whose name's Oren Jacobi.
Or
And he's a musician as well as a great music editor, and he's just a true wizard. And what made Takedown hard, and same thing that made the finale, the climactic scene hard, Josh, was like you need to have a narrative structure that feels meaningful and propulsive. And then you need to have a song that has a musical structure that needs to follow some rules. And so like we would start the takedown song and then we'd be like the next storytelling beat is a conversation between Rumi and the girls that might be suspended musically. So Nathan would have the edit working, but then he'd be like, Oren, I need you to create 11 bars or frames of musical breakdown and extend the track so you don't even realize that the music is almost like treading water. It still feels
Has
like a song,
paused.
but
And
you're allowing story to develop. And fortunately we had sort of cracked that teamwork. And when we got to the finale, it was a bigger version of that, which is like this is the climax of a film, which is meant to feel never should feel inevitable. You don't want it to. Oftentimes, a good pop anthem feels propulsive from the start, but we're like, no, we need this to feel tenuous, like for minutes and minutes, and then feel propulsive, and then be interrupted, and then start again. And so to be able to work the edit of the film and then go to the music editor and be like, now give us a minute and a half of underscore while Rumi talks to Gino and he dies, and we reprise elements of the song as score. Wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So I think that was a really neat thing to see Nathan's editing chops and Oren's music editing chops all come together because that's why I think it works in a pop construct rather than a like a Broadway construct.
mhm.
It can have that up tempo production quality.
one
There,
just to piggyback on that, one of the really hardest thing is that most of our songs, people are actually talking in them as well. Like they'll
Yeah.
sing and
Yeah.
they'll stop to talk. So we had to figure out where we can balance the dialogue of what these characters need to say, but they're also singing, in the next shot and stuff like this. And it was a very, very hard thing to do. So having Oren to be like, hey, would you rather I add at this part or am I okay to take away to make it musically? And so it was just, if anyone out there is editing any sort of musical, hire a music editor.
Not Orin though, because he's ours.
Yeah, you can't have
Yeah, no,
Oren.
don't take
He's
Oren.
he's he's ours for life.
Or
So
or we had a great exec music producer, Ian Eisendrath, and he came from Broadway, Josh, so he brought this really incredibly important and annoying set of questions about what story we were telling with our songs. And I think and he was just a hammer, and he would force us to answer these questions, and it was really critical to making the songs have a, a meaning beyond the pop metaphors.
Yeah.
Were there any questions that he asked you that were particularly difficult or that made you really be like, what are we actually doing here?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, every meeting.
Every
Oh my
meeting.
God, every
We would be
time.
like, Chris and I would be like, oh gosh, we can't figure out this story thing or this character thing, or like it just like Rumi's story, Rumi's journey, and we'd be like, oh, time for a music meeting with Ian, and we'd like happily go to this meeting, and Ian would be like, okay, so but what is Rumi's story? And so he kind of forced us to answer these really tough story questions. So we had like double writing, you know,
Yeah,
sessions. And I think that's what really kind of forced us to really figure it out. And, because we had to figure it out to have the songs written
yep.
because the songs were so integrated into the story. They were basically just writing. It was just script writing there too. It was just in music form. So yeah, he was very annoying.
It sounds like the kind of annoying though that really pushed you all
Oh,
Yeah,
to the
like
totally.
best
any
film you
great
were
Yes.
partner.
capable.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
On the subject of music, I want to get to another question from Marlon, who says, because the film lives in music and movement, did you treat editing like choreography? Were there moments where you cut against the beat intentionally to create tension?
Oh, 100%.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's many times where I'm very much cutting to the happiness of like soda pop and it's on the beat, stuff like that. But then there's other times you might have felt a little uncomfortable or tension because things just subconsciously don't sound a little bit, like they're not really in sync, but you feel like they want to be, and they make this little feeling of uncomfortableness. And, that's, really fun things you can do kind of behind the scenes just to really put forth the emotion and the storytelling that you want the audience to be experiencing with you. So,
Just a short bit ago, we were just talking about, you guys had mentioned that the finale of the film, or the climax of the film, what it sounds like was one of the most difficult ones to crack. I mean, that moment when they've finally broken free of everything and just come out on stage. I mean, it to me is one of the most transcendent moments of cinema of the past
Oh,
long while.
Oh, thank you.
thank
Was
you.
that moment one that was particularly hard for you to crack? And if it was, how did you know when you finally did crack that moment to achieve that actual emotional catharsis?
Mm.
Mhm. I I
Yeah,
feel like
so many
yeah,
things had to come together late for that to work,
but it
Like,
felt like I mean, sorry, just to I feel like we had that climax where it would be this big song number and the crowd kind of singing along. We had that from the first draft, and so that was
mhm.
always like an emotional moment to work towards.
The mountaintop.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you could go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I feel like we had real epiphanies late in the writing process with um, we had a lot of versions to your earlier question, Josh, about sort of what fell to the wayside with much more in-depth scenes about Rumi and Celine and her past and her parents and information that whether it's interesting or not, actually wasn't what the story was about. The story was about
Mhm.
the three girls and the family, this sort of found family that they made together when they had nowhere else to go. And so we figured out that that's what, even in that final Celine sequence, it wasn't about Celine necessarily saying anything, giving Rumi any closure so much as saying, like, you will not get the love that you want, the unconditional love. You're not going to get it here. And you're not going to be able to live by the rules that I've raised you by. And so Rumi figures out, like, I got to get it somewhere else. And that, I don't know, I think when we were writing it, when we figured out, like,
Yeah.
Rumi has to let go of the religion that raised her and write her own religion,
Hmm.
that we were already working on the finale, but that epiphany made the finale like more powerful because it
Hmm.
felt more clear as storytellers what that song was about and more high stakes that Rumi and like Mira and Zoe were her only place she could ever get this. So there were like a lot of, I think, sort of writing and editing choices that dovetailed so that the moment, which feels really great, doesn't, it feels very pointed. It feels like it knows what it's about rather than maybe that whole premise of like your strengths can be your weaknesses and flaws can be strengths. It can be very generic and kind of like, what does that even mean? So I feel like I'm proud that we narrowed that stuff down so the song could have more weight.
But then it just that in that moment of the song, even it was just such a process because it was the last one of the last scenes that we were working on in animation too. And we brought that we were in reviews with animation and you know the song kind of like trucks along and then the girls embrace and then we kind of pause the song a little bit. It kind of like builds back up, and we really wanted that to feel very emotional. So in the cut, I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you know, Nathan. Like we didn't have those quick cuts of the girls like as they're fighting and
Yeah.
singing toward and fighting through these demons. Not even fighting, just get out of the way demons, trying to get towards each other. And we really wanted to like build up that moment. So we created these quick cuts back and forth to the beat of the the music of all of the three girls, and then they embrace, and then we have this like long wide shot with us, and then in effects and lighting, we added this like beam of like light that kind of sweeps over them, and that just it's just to say that at with every process through of animation, we just the team just added another layer and another layer just to make that moment that much more emotional. And so it's just it's you know that's kind of the best thing about animation is just every department you work with, you're able to just add something else that just, you know, makes this makes that little part of the movie just so much more magical.
Yeah, and the shout out to Stephen Kirk and Jenna Andrews, the
Yeah.
songwriters on that one, because they did a trillion versions. And the first few were pretty, we were like, oh no, this is like the thing we had wrong was it was very like it was very sort of anthemic right away.
Yeah.
And we had been temping with this beautiful Lord song called Green Light, which I'm sure everybody knows. But it's very much like a person in pain and very much unable to figure out why the pain they're in has any value. And then they kind of come out the other side and be like, I don't know, this, what I'm feeling right now really hurts, but I think when I come through the other side, I'll be better off for it. And as soon as we could explain that to them, the song changed. But then they wrote a great song, and then we would send them crazy requests like, Stephen, can you give us, you have a you have a verse and a pre and a chorus and another verse, another pre and a chorus. Now give us 2 minutes of instrumental build, just reprising the motifs, the musical ideas in the song. We referred to like one of the closing score cues in Andor, which does a great thing of recirculating a motif and building it. And it was like, I think it was like Christmas. And Stephen was like, uh, okay. And disappeared for 2 days and then sent us 2 minutes. And we were able to use that in the edit to like create, I don't want to call it filler, but essentially score for the song. So many moments where you felt like you were lobbing these crazy asks over the wall creatively and hoping that the talented people could hit the mark, but they did.
And that moment in the film almost feels like inspiration because these two songs both feel like a phoenix rising from the ashes almost. And just
Totally.
really soaring through the sky. I mean, it's such a fascinating comparison. I love that song. And no, I don't think I'll ever be able to see this part of the film again without thinking of it.
Sorry.
No. I'm glad that you shared that. Um, Helen from our audience, and Max had a similar question, said, at what point in the process, similar to what I was asking earlier about with that one moment in the film, at what point in the process did you all feel that the film clicked for you? Was it during storyboard, animatic reviews, layout, or when final renders and sound came together?
Oh, when it was
Um,
all finished and we were at the mix stage. I'm just kidding. I mean, if if it's not, then you're in trouble. Let's see.
it's weird for me because I feel like
Hmm.
when Maggie and I were writing the third act of the very first draft, we were doing it during COVID, just in
Hmm.
final draft. And I remember writing in there and then texting being like, I love this movie. This is cool, man. Like
Yeah.
this is something. And then you took a deep breath and you spent 5 years working, but it always felt like we were still kind of chasing that
Hmm.
aspiration. That was it for
Yeah.
me anyway.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that was one of them. But I think with Rumi's character, once we decided that, in the Dark Night of the Soul, she would go and ask
Mm,
essentially to be killed because, she is not worthy of being in, existing because of what she is. I think that really defined who she is to us. We really wanted to keep our main character active and make this active choice at that moment of the movie. And it felt like she would do that. She's above anything else. She is a hunter, she's a warrior, and we wanted to keep her strong. Um, and so many times when we would write things like that for Rumi, we would just say like, "Oh, Rumi," we just feel so bad for her. We just like
poor
knock her
kid.
down constantly. Poor kid. So yeah, I think for me that was like kind of the moment where we figured her out.
What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan.
For me, it's always a little different because I always say I'm there from script to screen, so I'll read the script, but
Mhm.
not as the person who wrote the script. For me, it really starts coming together when I start editing the movie to really see the feel and the tone and the emotionality of it. And
Mm,
it's funny that Maggie brings up the Dark Night of the Soul because the first two sequences I cut, as I mentioned, was
Yeah,
what became the soda pop
yeah.
sequence and that. And so I had
yeah,
this crazy juxtaposition of two different, completely different sequences, and I was like,
yes.
okay, and I was like, what movie am I making? Like. I want to know how we fill in all these other holes and what's going to happen in the rest of it, and then they didn't let me leave for another 3 years until it was done. So, but for an editor, I think, you work in a lot of individual sequences. Then when you start tying them together, putting them up in reels is where you really start to see how it's going to work and what's not working. And then we always worked, we're always working towards a screening forever.
Hmm.
That's just, it never goes away.
Hmm.
And, you never get a break. And so when we put up the very first screening, that's when you really, I mean, obviously we watched it way before 100 times or whatever, but when you watch it all in front of the executives and the crew and everybody, that's when you're kind of like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what Chris and Maggie's vision for this movie is, and I know it's going to be amazing. And I was actually kind of scheduled to go do another movie, and I told them, I was like, hey, sorry, I'm gonna stay with the K-pop people
Oh, is that
instead.
how it went? I thought we just stole you.
Well, well, well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a depending on who's on the call, there's a couple different versions.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just kind of fun when those first two sequences, I had never really worked on anything like it. I had obviously never working on a movie based on anything from Korea or anything like that, or even a big
A
musical, to be
musical?
honest.
Yeah.
And so it was just a challenge, and everything was so unique, and the characters and the vision that they had. I was like, this is it's not so much that the movie clicked for me, it clicked for me that I needed to do this movie.
Oh,
So
Makes sense.
What a lovely thing to say. Um,
Yeah.
oh.
I want to
That's
close
why we
off.
keep him around.
I can see why you
that's
keep him
that's a
around,
gold star
Maggie.
moment. Now
He's been
I have
Sorry.
working on
five
writing the
gold
outline
stars.
for eight
Goes to-
months. Yeah.
I want to close off by asking you a question from Lizette in our audience, who was wondering what your biggest fear on making this film was. And I would love to ask, how did you three overcome whatever your respective or collective fears were?
Mm.
Oh.
I mean, I can knock out mine real quick what they think. I
Oh.
mean,
Yeah,
the
go
biggest
ahead.
fear of an editor is letting your directors down. Like,
Oh.
I mean,
Mm.
you want to make it as perfect for them as possible and get it the way they absolutely want it. And so when a scene is not working, not to really any fault of your own, that can have whatever problems, but you feel that in the edit bay. It's like, God, I want the scene to be working, but it's not, and so you always have the fear of making something and that it's just going to bomb. But, the thing about editing, you just keep going and going and going until you get it right. And so, my main goal is like there are producers and there's studio executives, but I always consider the directors like they're my bosses. I want to make them
Mm.
happy more than I want to make anybody else happy because they're the ones that
That's
are
why we keep him around right there, actually. Yeah,
exactly. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Ooh,
that was
two
just
gold
my
stars.
yeah.
oh
Two
man,
in a
now I'm up to
row.
six.
The heck?
Maggie and Chris, what about you guys?
Oh. I would say very similar thing. It's just for me, it's just letting down the crew. And, like I think Chris and I worked very, very hard. We pushed ourselves to our limit. I mean, to a limit that I didn't even think I had, creatively and as a writer and a director, and just from my experience of working on these films for over 10 years before directing, I know how much people put into their work, like into the scene that they're working on, or just the prop that they're working on. And I just didn't want to let them down. I wanted to give them a film that they would be really proud to have spent all this time in. So yeah, I think that was my fears, like not disappointing the crew, but
Yeah.
also myself. Yeah.
Well, we talk about it. We talk about the children of men analogy, which is, do you remember the one shot, Josh, where they're trying to get the baby through the war zone?
One of my
And the thing
favorite
is with
films.
animation, yeah,
Yeah.
making an animated movie, it goes through so many departments. Each of the departments is filled with dozens of really talented people who have like decades of practice doing it, and they all give so much to the movie. And then you get, for example, you get a script that you like, but you could kill it in storyboarding and editing. Maybe you get a storyboard edit animatic you like, you could kill it in animation. You have great animation, you can kill that shit in lighting, do that wrong, and everything falls apart. You get to the final mix stage, and we
Yeah.
we had things that happened on the mix stage. We're like, oh no, we killed a
Yeah.
baby. Um, so it is that, like Maggie's saying, what is happening is you're more, but also you feel a responsibility for all the hard work that has made it wonderful and worth fighting for as it enters the new stage of production. And so you that is often a really motivating factor when you're tired and you've been trying to write this stupid scene for 5 years and you can't crack it, but you've cracked all the other scenes and you're like, we can't go
Mhm.
home, even though it's Saturday at midnight. We can't go home because we haven't cracked this one. It's 27 out of 28. Like, oh, but I kind of love that. It's like it's accumulation and you can't start that way, but that's the momentum that you get from your own crew.
I feel like that's a perfect way to close us off for the day. And by the way, I forgot to congratulate you guys because this is good timing that we're doing this. Congratulations on being in the Criterion Collection now with K-pop Demon
Yay.
Hunters. What a
Thank you.
Oh
wonderful
yeah, that's
announcement to see
awesome.
today. So everybody get a copy of K-pop Demon Hunters when it comes to Criterion. Maggie, Chris, and Nathan, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for spending an hour with us. I just really appreciate it. It's been such a delight.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
really
welcome.
fun.
Thank you.
Great
Yeah, really fun,
questions.
Josh.
Thank you to everybody in the audience for being here as well. A quick announcement as to what we have upcoming. Tomorrow night we have a virtual screening. We have links available and Q&A on the live action short. Then on Wednesday we have production designer Tamara Deverell on Frankenstein. And then Friday we have the editorial, sound, and VFX crew from F1, followed by a friend of Dorothy on Monday. Tickets are free for
Wow.
everything. They're at the Q&Agency.com. We are at the Q&A Agency on social media. Good night, everybody. And Maggie, Nathan, and Chris, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. Good night.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. That was fun.